Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to talk about The Outsiders. That is the novel we will be reading together this quarter. I'm super excited because it's one of my favorite novels. It is a great story, but in order to understand what's happening in the story, we need a little bit of background information. Now, in order to understand the background information, I'm going to ask you to take some notes. Now, on your hyperdocument, you will see a link to a worksheet that's called the Outsiders PowerPoint Notes. And I'd like you to fill this in as I'm talking, and then you'll go ahead and turn it in on Schoology once you've finished watching this video and learning some new things about the 1950s and 60s. So, our novel is called The Outsiders, and it's by a female writer, which was very unusual at the time that this was written, and her name is S.E. Hinton. So the first thing I'd like you to fill in on your worksheet is, have you ever felt like an outsider? That's number one. So an outsider is someone who does not belong to the group. Have you ever felt that way? If so, write down a time when you felt like that. If not, why do you think you haven't felt that way? You can pause the video now and do that as we go. Number two, how are outsiders usually treated? So people who don't fit in with the group. How do people usually treat them at school or in the community? Number three, do you think our school has outsiders? If you do, who are they? If you don't, why don't you think we have outsiders? You can pause the video now and fill in those three answers. So often our first impressions, or the things we see immediately when we meet people, help us make decisions about what type of person they are. Now, this comes from evolution, because when humans were hunter-gatherers way, way back in the day, they needed to be able to judge whether or not a person or animal was a danger to them in a split second, so they could run away if they needed to. For example, if you've been coming to campus, then you made a decision about me within the first 5 seconds of seeing my face. You decided, is Miss Connolly a safe person to be around? Is Miss Connolly a nice person? Am I going to like this class this year? Or am I going to hate this class this year? Now, if you didn't see me in person, then when we first started out together, you made those same assumptions based on a Zoom call or a video that I made. And so your subconscious, which means making decisions without you thinking about it, made those decisions without you even knowing that you did. Okay? So I'd like you to look at these two pictures. The one on the left shows a gentleman in a leather jacket with a knife in his hand. The one on the right shows two kids in a sports jacket and a brown skirt hanging out together in the grass. I would like you to tell me what you think under the first impressions section of your worksheet about each of the two pictures. So number one is the left photo. So let's write down, what did you think immediately when you saw this photo? Is this person a good person or a bad person? Is this man angry or happy? Is this person, does he work for a living? If so, where? Does he go to school? Is he a positive influence or a negative influence? I want you to write down everything you thought when you first saw this photo under the left picture section now. When you're done with that, go on to the right photo section. I want you to write down the first things you thought of these two people when you saw their picture. Are they nice people or mean people? Are they going to school or working? Are they good kids or bad kids? Do they drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes? Do they play sports? Do they finish their homework on time? What do you think about these two from the very first moment you see them? Go ahead and write that down now. Feel free to pause the video if you need more time. The next section, I'd like you to think about a couple of things that we often don't even notice when we talk to people. So let's think about ourselves first. Number 1 says, would you do anything to protect your family? Now you'll notice the word anything is underlined. So think about the most crazy thing you would do to protect your family. Would you commit murder to protect your family? Would you sell everything you own to protect your family? Would you go to prison to protect your family? Would you lose a job that you love to protect your family? Think about that and write your answer next to number 1. Number 2, loyalty is the thread that holds friendships together. Now, loyalty means that you will support your friend even if you don't agree with what they're doing. So, do you believe that loyalty is what keeps people together? Yes or no, and why? Number 3, violence is sometimes necessary to resolve a conflict. So, do you think that sometimes you have to use violence to solve a problem? Yes or no, and why? Remember, this is your opinion. So I am not looking for a specific answer. I just want to know what you think. Number 4, people from different economic classes, meaning people with different levels of money, will usually not be friends. So do you agree with this or no, and why? Do you think that someone who's really rich can be friends with somebody who's really poor? Do you think somebody who's from the middle class, meaning that they have enough to pay their bills and maybe have a couple luxury items like a nice car, but aren't super rich, can they be friends with a rich person or a poor person? What do you think? Write it down now. So, our book, The Outsiders, has a very specific cover. It has, you can go ahead and Google it. And our cover shows 4 boys in sort of a dark outline. If you Google it, you'll see what I'm talking about. I want you just to describe what you see. What does the cover show us about the novel? What do you think the title, The Outsiders, really means? I want you to take a couple of minutes and think about those things. Then Google the picture and see what it looks like. Then answer what you think the cover is showing us about the book. Now, it's important to understand our author's point of view whenever we read a novel. This allows us to understand where the person who wrote the book was coming from when they sat down and put their pen to paper. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about S.E. Hinton. This is her. It's a picture of her from the 60s. And so I want you to pay attention because you are being asked to write this down, but there will also be some information we need for later. Okay? So S.E. Hinton was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1948. When she was young, she really liked to read and spend her time writing her own stories. She wanted to create stories, but she wanted them to be true and for teenagers specifically. She really wanted to make sure that she was telling true stories or stories that didn't have a lot of sugarcoating. And when we say that, we mean fake happiness. So she wanted real stories that teenagers could relate to. Here's a picture of Oklahoma. This is where Tulsa, Oklahoma is. You can see it's quite a difference from where we are here in San Diego. So she wrote The Outsiders while she was in high school. At her graduation ceremony, she was offered a publication contract for the novel, which is amazing. That never happens. She was so lucky and talented. So she published the novel under the name S.E. Hinton instead of her real name, which is Susan Eloise Hinton, because the publishers didn't think that boys who were reading the book would want to read a novel who was written by a girl. Okay, so keep that in mind. After the success of The Outsiders, she went to the University of Tulsa, where she earned a bachelor's degree in education. In college, she met a man named David Einhoff, who she would later marry. He was a major influence in her work and her second novel that's called That Was Then and This Is Now. She married David, and they had one son named Nicholas David Hinton. She wrote a few more books that are called Tex, Rumblefish, Taming of the Star Runner, etc. In 1990s, she focused mainly on making children's picture books. Okay, here's the questions that I told you were going to be asked of you, so hopefully you were listening. In your worksheet, please write down the answers to the following questions. Number 1, where was S.E. Hinton born? Now don't go back and look, that would be cheating. Do this from memory. Number 2, what did she enjoy doing as a child? Number 3, when did she write The Outsiders? Number 4, why didn't she publish using her real name? Number 5, where did she meet her husband? Number 6, name one other book she wrote besides The Outsiders. Hopefully you got all the answers right without looking. I'll be sure to check them when you turn it in on Schoology tonight. So, The Outsiders was inspired by real-life events in Hinton's high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So this is a semi-true story. That means not everything that happens in the book is real, but most of it really happened. This novel is considered to be the first realistic young adult novel. That means it's something that really happened, and it's written specifically for teenagers. This is what Hinton's high school looked like. It was called Will Rogers High School. So many of Hinton's novels were so successful that they made them into movies. The Outsiders was made into a movie in 1983. That Was Then, This Is Now was made into a movie in 1985. Tex was made into a movie in 1982. And Rumblefish was also made into a movie in 1983. Let's talk about the historical context. What does that mean? That means we're going to talk about what was happening in history when this book was written. Because a lot of the time, the things that are going on in society or in the world really affect how authors write about their topic. So in America in the 1960s, there was lots of what's called social division. Young people really felt like older people did not understand them, and they wanted to make their political opinions heard. Race relations were also changing drastically as the civil rights movement drew attention to the discrimination against African Americans. What does this mean? This means that the civil rights movement was happening in America, and that was showing a lot of people that there were huge differences between the way people treated white people and Black people specifically. They also included other people of color, like Mexican people or Indian, Native American people or Indian people from India. Okay, so there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of anger and hurt and outrage during this time. So there were lots of protests and lots of other things that were going on in politics that were really affecting the way young people viewed older people, the way people of different races viewed each other, and the way that Americans interacted with each other in general. So Hinton does not point to any of these specifically, but she does talk a lot about how young people felt about these issues in the book, The Outsiders. So keep that in mind because it's going to come into play in our story. So one of the most important parts of today's background information is understanding the words that are going to be used in the book. There's a lot of words in the book that we don't use anymore, so it's hard to understand what they mean if I don't tell you directly. Okay, so one of the words you will hear is fuzz, F-U-Z-Z. They call them the fuzz, and what that means is the police. So when you hear someone in the book refer to the fuzz, they're talking about police officers. When you hear someone in the book say a heater, Heater, it means a gun. They call it a heater because of the hot metal that comes out of the gun when it is shot. So it's called a heater. A broad, B-R-O-A-D, is also another word for a woman. So they would have called a good-looking girl a broad. Now, we don't use these terms anymore, specifically this one. This one is considered offensive if you say it to a woman today. So please do not repeat that when you're talking to people outside of our room. But for the purpose of reading this book, we need to know that a broad is a woman during this time period. Okay? Hacked off means getting angry. You're very angry. You're hacked off. A rumble means a fight. Rumble means a fight. JD means a juvenile delinquent. What is a juvenile delinquent? It's a young person, usually a teenager, who does things that are illegal. So this would be a kid who's been sent to juvie. That's where juvie gets its name, from juvenile delinquent. Okay, so a kid who's been put in jail, or someone who does illegal things and is a teenager. The cooler is jail. So if you hear someone talk about being in the cooler, they were in jail. And finally, pickled means drunk. I got so pickled last night means that they were very intoxicated the night before. Okay? So those are our terms. Please make sure you write them down on your worksheet and study them so that when we encounter them in the book, you'll know what they're talking about. Now, we'll continue reading The Outsiders this week. I'm very excited to get started. So please see the hyperdoc for directions on what to read when and what to do with that knowledge. Have a wonderful day.